Hello, in this video we're going to look at a possible solution for the last part of the old exam. So this is a coding question. Important to know that there's lots of ways to do this. I'm showing you one possible solution here, and I do recommend that you've attempted this problem fully before watching this video. So the problem description is the following. The black box on an aircraft keeps track of all types of information on a plane. One type of information is the altitude of the aircraft. Altitude readings taken in meters are recorded every minute and stored in an array of integers. The readings do not begin until after takeoff and stop being taken before descent. Programs are designed to analyze the information from the black box. So our input specifications. We want no user input. We want to declare an array called altitude with 300, that's 5 hours flight, which is 300 minutes, elements. So what I understand from this is that the elements are the height, and the indexes are the time. So at the 0th index we have our first height measurement, and then 1 minute later at the first index we're going to have our second height reading. We want to initialize the array altitude to random values greater than 7,000 but less than 14,000. Assume there is a method in the same class with the following information. So in this problem we've been given a built-in method, and though we don't have to use it, it is useful to make use of these because it reduces the amount of code you have to write. Our output specifications are: we need to print out the highest altitude reached, the lowest altitude reached, the difference between the highest and lowest altitude, and the number of minutes between the highest and lowest altitude. Let's take a look, shall we? So with this problem, the first thing we did was declared some variables. We made a variable called max, a variable called min, a variable called tmax, and a variable called tmin. So max and min store our maximum height and our minimum height. Tmax and tmin store our maximum time and our minimum time. So the first thing we want to make sure we notice here is initialization. It's really important that you initialize the max and min to values that will be overwritten. So if I initialize my maximum to a number far below the range, or even just below the range of our flying heights, in my case put negative 1,000, we know this will get overwritten. If I initialize min to something above the highest value, we know it will be overwritten. Tmax and tmin store the times that we reach the various altitudes, and we can set those both to 0 to start. So here we've declared our array called altitude, and we've made it with 300 elements. And then I use a loop to go through and assign each element a value. So don't forget our saying with for loops: count, check, change. And it's really important that when we do this, we actually use the built-in technique to find the length of the array. So this line here, we have altitude at I is equal to gen values 7,000 through 14,000. So now we come down a little bit, and now we want to look at all the elements in the array and find the max and find the min. Of course, you could do this problem in in one loop, but I've done it in two. So again, our count, our check, and our change. And I use an if statement, and I say if max is less than altitude at I, the max becomes altitude at I, and we store the time. And then we have a second if statement: if min is greater than altitude at I, min becomes altitude at I, and we set time min is I, and then I'm done. So once we finish this loop structure here, we'll have looked at every element and we'll have found the maximum and minimum height that the plane reaches. Now there is the technique to use the math.max method or the math.min method, and though it works here, it's not as efficient because we do have to store the time as well, and that can become that requires us writing if statement. However, please be aware of the max and min method in the math class. So then once we've done this, we are going to use a variable called diff, and we're going to set that equal to the max minus the min. Now you'll notice at the top I haven't actually declared that. One strategy when you're writing these types of problems is leave space to add new variables. You'll notice another variable I include is time. Okay, if for some reason you need to insert a little bit of code, just put a nice arrow and neatly write the code in that position. So now we find the difference between the maximum height and the minimum height. And in here, it's not as simple as taking the Tmax minus the Tmin, because we could run into a case where if max is bigger than, if the maximum altitude is hit before the minimum altitude or vice versa, and it will affect the outcome. So if the minimum height occurs before the maximum height, we're going to say the maximum height minus the minimum height to find the difference in time. Otherwise, we're going to reverse that operation. Now, a nice way to do this step without using this if statement is to use the math.absolute value method. And what that does is it takes whatever is passed as a parameter and finds the absolute value of it. So if I say Tmax minus Tmin, and we're going to put that into time, this one line does the same thing as that code chunk. And then I output my information. So again, this is one of many solutions to this, or approaches to this problem. They all do the same thing, but there's different ways we can approach certain aspects. I do strongly recommend that you do sit down and try and write this problem fully on your own. As I said at the start of the video, before watching this, attempt the problem fully. If you didn't do that, I recommend you now stop the video, try the full problem, and then compare your answer to mine. Hope that helped.